So what's the deal with these ultralight coolers? I feel like some marketing guy just figured out that you could injection mold a cooler for a lot less money than you can rotomold one. Then you can call it ultralight and make a killing. So I'm gonna start by taping some of these little thermometers inside the coolers on the lid. Then we're gonna go get ice. We're gonna fill them all up with ice, put some sodas in there, and we're gonna leave them outside in the sun for the next several days until the ice is gone, and we're just gonna see how they each perform, which one holds ice longer, all that good stuff. Then we're gonna look at some of the specs and features so that if you're interested in one of these ultralight coolers, you can see what they're like side by side. So stick around.
Gear up and get outside.
Just so you know, I received the Engel and the Frosted Frog coolers that I'm including in this video for free. The company sent them to me so I could test them and try them out. I do that sometimes because it helps with the cooler budget, because I spend a lot of money on coolers, but I treat all the coolers the same. There's no strings attached, so I can say what I want and what I really think. All right, here they all are. I have put ice in all of these coolers. Proportionally, they all have approximately an equal amount of ice. Let's shut them up and go home. Don't worry, I'll get them latched up too. So there you have it, my friends. 7 different coolers, all lined up and ready to go. This is shaded in the late evening and in the early morning, but it has full sun for most of the day. This is the south side of my house. So I'm gonna leave these in the sun and hope this ice challenge doesn't last too terribly long, for my sake. All right, so coolers loaded, ice, Cokes. I'm gonna close all the lids up tight now and just let it rip. We're gonna wait till all the ice melts in every single one. Check back tomorrow. All right, it is a new day. It has been 24 hours. Again, it is evening. So as you can see, we are once again in the shade. But these coolers were in the sun for the better part of the hot part of the day. I will also sync up the data from these thermometers that are hanging in there, and I can kind of track the trend over the entire time they're out here. So that'll probably be the most useful in terms of comparing one against the other. But just as a visual inspection, so there's a shot at the Frosted Frog. Here's a shot at the Engel, the RTIC. Pretty similar. Here is the Pelican. Coho. Here's the YETI Roadie 48. Okay, and the 40's on that coat. RTIC Ultra-Light wheeled. There's a look inside there. Heck, let's grab a Coke out of this one. That's the real test, right? Well, we didn't learn a whole lot today, but there's still plenty of time left. We'll learn something else tomorrow. Oh, there's just something about a really cold Coke. All right, it has been another day. This time it is in the afternoon so that you can see these are all in the full sun. For most of the middle of the day, full sun. Let's just take a look down the line. The other big change today is I did put hot dogs in there. I came in here this morning and I put some hot dogs in here. We'll take a quick look and we'll check the temperatures of each of those dogs. Okay, here's the Engel, looking good. That dog is mid-30s as well. The RTIC Ultra-Light, the non-wheeled one. That dog's down at 35 degrees. Here's the Pelican, well under 40. The FDA says food safe temperature is 40 degrees, so I'm usually shooting for anything under 40 is good. Here I'm in the 34 range, that's excellent. Here's the YETI Roadie. This one performed very well in the last ice challenge I did, 35 degrees. And here's our RTIC. I did drink a Coca-Cola out of here yesterday. 5 range as well. All good, check back tomorrow. All right, it is day 3. We are just gonna do a quick check. Here is the Frosted Frog. Oh, lots of water in there today. The Engel, also showing a lot of water. Got a turning point, yep, water and everything. It's always been water, there's just a lot more apparent now. Yep, there's a whole bunch in the Pelican. A little Coho, still some ice down there, all clumped up, but plenty of cold water. Here's the YETI Roadie 48. Here's the RTIC Ultralight wheeled. I did sync the thermometers and they're all tracking, so we'll look at all that at the end. But it was interesting just to notice quickly that some of these are peaking out at over 60 degrees when the sun's on it at the heat of the day, and some are well below 60 still. So that'll be interesting to kind of break that down cooler by cooler at the end. Suffice it to say, air temperature in there gets a lot warmer, especially near the top. But down in the ice, our hot dogs and drinks are still cold. It has been 5 days now since these coolers have been out here with ice in them, and I'm gonna do a check today, and I'm gonna even check the temps of those hot dogs. So let's take a look and see what's happened. While I'm doing this, I will say the weather has changed. It's a lot cooler now. It's only about 60 degrees, 65 degrees outside. All right, so here is still some ice in there, as you can see. Yeah, we're still well under 40 degrees, which is what we want. You'll notice those Cokes are no longer sitting on top of the ice, so I'd say there's definitely more water than ice in this one now. Here's the Engel UltraLite, kind of the same story. Looks like a similar proportion of ice to water. In my experience, having done these kinds of tests several times now, usually if there's still ice in there in that water, that hot dog or that meat is going to be below 40 degrees. We know it's food safe, and that's what's important. Here's the RTIC Ultra-Light. I dare say that has a bit more ice down there. Just by looking at it, it looks like more ice to me. 33 degrees on that dog. Here is the Pelican. Yeah, that's like 37, 36. It's still going down, so well under 40. Here's the Coho. As you can see, I've been drinking some of the Cokes out of some of these. That hot dog's still under 40 degrees, and you know, there's not too much ice left in this, so I suspect I only have about a day left. But that's not too shabby for a 24 quart cooler. That's really small, and it has half as much ice as the rest of these larger coolers. So I'm probably not gonna use a cooler this small to hold stuff cold that long anyway, so that's great. Here is the YETI Roadie. Yeah, we're below 40. And then here's the RTIC Ultra-Light wheeled. Hey, that dog too is still under 40, but look, quite a bit less ice in this one than the others, including the other RTIC. This happened the last time I did an ice retention test as well. Turns out this wheeled version has less insulation, especially in the lid, compared to the non-wheeled version. So just a note, if you're looking at that cooler, if you really want it to hold ice really long or in really hot weather, that non-wheeled version is going to do a little bit better for you. Okay, it's been 6 days and I do expect something to shake up today, so let's check things out. The Frosted Frog. Oh, look, there's not any ice left in there. And sure enough, that hot dog is no longer at a safe temperature. That's at almost 50 degrees. 47 degrees. So my guess is that ice melted quite a while ago. The Engel 60 quart Ultralight. Hey, look at that. It's still got a little bit of ice, so it's still hanging in there. Here we have the RTIC Ultralight. No wheels. And look, still plenty of ice in there. Moving on to the Pelican. Oh, look at that. This one's out too. No ice. But that water's a lot colder. Still sitting right at 40 degrees. Just barely above 41. So my guess is all that ice melted just within the last couple of hours. Now our little Coho, also done. The hot dog is coming in at 49 degrees, almost 50. So yeah, it's been a little while that ice has been melted, and that water temperature is over 50 degrees. But hey, all three of those that are now out still made it for 5 days, which is far longer than most people typically need. And these weren't even chock full of ice and food and stuff. So when a cooler is totally full, it tends to stay colder longer, so long as you have a good ice ratio. So not a bad performance on any of them, but those are the first ones that are out. Let's continue on. Here is the YETI Roadie 48. This one's usually a top performer and still the same. Look at all that ice. And last but not least, the RTIC Ultralight 52 quart wheeled. And how about that? Also out of ice. Okay, so 5 days for this one too. 50 degrees, 51 degrees basically. All right, so that's been warm a little while. Yep, right up there with the water temperature, almost 50 degrees. We'll see how this finishes out. Okay, it has been 1 week now. Let's check out the last 3 coolers that are still in this race. Here is the Engel 60 quart Ultralight and no more ice. All right, so it made it almost a week. I noticed they advertise on their website that it'll last up to 7 days, and it's pretty darn close. All right, let's check out the RTIC 52 quart Ultralight, the non-wheeled version. Also out of the game. Let's check the last one, the YETI Roadie 48. Look at that. Still has ice. So I expect our water is darn near freezing, up in the 32 degree range. That hot dog still well under 40 degrees. I'm not totally surprised with that YETI Roadie 48. It did the best in its class in the last ice retention challenge I did with 38 different coolers all lined up back here. But I'll let it keep going and we'll see. I expect tomorrow, maybe the next day, that ice will be gone. It's pretty darn close. All right, it has been 8 days. Let's see if there's still ice in this YETI. Nope. Now we're done with that darn ice challenge. That took a while. Now, before I give you the full rundown on how each of these coolers did for ice retention and what I like about them or don't, let's take a look at this table for some interesting tidbits about them. Note that none are bear resistance certified by the International Grizzly Bear Committee. Not even a YETI. You'll have to spend more money on a rotomolded cooler for that bear resistant certification. Only the Pelican and the Frosted Frog are made in the USA if you like that, but they weren't our top finishers anyway. 5 years is the average warranty period. Shame on you, Arctic, for shortchanging us with only a year, but kudos to you, Pelican, for that Lifetime Achievement Award. As far as price goes, $200 seems a reasonable price to pay for this type of cooler, so you can count on YETI to double that. Then there's the weight factor. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a Costco-sized bag of flour isn't exactly what I consider to be ultralight. And all of these coolers come in right around that mark. The Frosted Frog, Arctic, and Engel, who carry the enthusiasm of the weight loss industry in their name, are indeed on the lighter end of the other full-size coolers. Now let's get to this fancy chart I made, and let me try to break it down for you so you understand what's going on. This is a chart of this little mini ice retention challenge we've done over the past week. There's a line in there for each cooler. Each peak you see in this chart represents the hottest part of each day. Each trough is the coolest part of each night, which usually happens in the wee hours of the morning where I live. Each line ends when I observed that cooler had no more ice. The higher highs the first few days are due to warmer weather, whereas the last few days were cloudy and cooler, which is why the overall temperatures those days were lower. We're going to run through these one by one in order of the best ice retention down to the least best ice retention, and I say that because they all are pretty decent coolers. So starting with the YETI Roadie 48. In this graph, you'll see a thick blue line that represents this YETI cooler. As you can see, it held ice the longest, but it never got the coldest and was even one of the warmest in the heat of the day. I think the shape of this cooler plays into its excellent performance because it is deep and narrow compared to the others, which I believe helps keep things at the bottom colder longer. Some things I really like about this cooler include the latches. They're just really easy to use. They provide a nice tight seal. You have this rubber gasket as well, which does a good job, obviously, at keeping air in. Got a couple things like tie-down strap slots and these rigid handles you can pick it up with on the sides. But because it's a wheeled cooler, and a very nice wheeled cooler at that, it just rolls smoothly over everything. It's got this nice extractable toe handle as well. And that just really does a good job, in my opinion. I also appreciate that this cooler comes with a dry goods tray that you can set in there. For the price of $400 whopping, which is double what most of these others cost, I would expect something fancy. But you know what it doesn't have is the other basic frills and gimmicks that everybody else puts on now, like a bottle opener or padlock holes. And it's not bear resistant certified like everybody thinks Yetis are. So great cooler and still my favorite YETI because it's just so functional, but it doesn't serve every purpose and you're paying for that name. Next we have the RTIC 52 quart Ultralight cooler, which has become very popular as of late. In this chart, it's represented by the thick yellow line. As you can see, it is a solid performer with the lowest temp of any cooler on any day at exactly 33 degrees, and for the most part among the lowest high temperatures in the sun despite its darker color. That lid insulation is thick. All around, this RTIC is a solid performer and it's a really good value at $200, and sometimes it goes on sale. As of the time of filming, it was on sale for $180. So keep an eye out for a good deal, and this is a great deal for a cooler. I also think it would make a great back of the truck cooler. Some folks asked me about that in comments recently, and I think this is a good option because it's injection molded, and one benefit potentially of that, and this is just kind of based on my experience and some reading between the lines. I don't know that it is scientifically accurate, but injection molded coolers are likely more heat resistant, less likely to warp or become deformed like you might see in some either cheaper coolers or much more expensive rotomolded coolers. Plus, it's just not as expensive, and RTIC isn't quite as desirable of a brand for some as a YETI, so it's probably less likely to get stolen out of the back of your truck. These RTICs are also widely available, besides buying them directly from them on their website, and I will put affiliate links in the description below if you're interested. You can also find this cooler on Amazon and often even in Walmart. Now, these RTIC coolers are pretty tough and pretty rugged. I really like the latches. They're very easy to undo and redo, even with one hand. Got a nice lip here to open, and here's where you can see there's that pretty thick insulation. Granted, there's an indentation here, but still, they pack a lot of insulation in this one, especially compared to the wheeled version, which we'll see here in a minute. You still have that gasket, you've got tie-down slots, you've got 2 drain plugs, which I don't know that that's entirely necessary, 2 different sizes, but they're there. You've got padlock holes, and you've got pretty sturdy rope handles that do the job. You can also grip it right here, which is nice. One thing I don't love about these RTICs is the type of drain plug they use. I've had other coolers where that gets banged up on something, the threads get ruined, and it's really hard to get a seal, and you just have a cooler that leaks all the time. So I prefer the female drains with a male plug. No fancy frills or extras or bonuses on this cooler. Doesn't even have a bottle opener, but for the price, it does a good job. Now we'll move on to a newer model that came out more recently. This is the Engel 60-quart Ultralight cooler, and it did a very admirable job. Represented by the orange line on this chart, it has impressive consistency with the lowest lows and, for the most part, the lowest highs in the sun and heat relative to all the others. At the peak of day 3, its high temperature was 55.7 degrees Fahrenheit when the Pelican broke 67 and even the YETI went over 61 degrees. But it looks like it ran out of ice a few hours before the Arctic on that night 7. Overall, what I love about this Engel is that it offers great value for the same price as that Arctic, including a few bonuses. I think I know who they're trying to compete against. For example, it's a little bigger at 60 quarts instead of 52, and for that same price, it comes with a dry goods basket and a divider. This has a few little extra features I like. It has, for example, a bottle opener right there. I really love the latches. They're just very easy to activate and use. Also has padlock holes, good sturdy plastic handles with some nylon rope. Can also grip it there nicely. It's got sort of a textured lid here that would make it kind of have a little bit of a grip for you if you want to stand on it and fish from it. I believe Engel comes out of Florida, and they've got a lot of fishermen who are fans of them. I also really love this drain plug. It's just pretty burly. You also don't have to unscrew it all the way to be able to drain. And kind of like I mentioned on that Arctic, this has the male plug and the female drain I like. When we look inside there, you can see that basket and that divider there. So kind of handy if you're trying to keep ice separate from food or drinks and food or whatever. Tie down slots, you can strap it to your truck. Nice rubber freezer gasket. Oh, I've already got made a home for some spiders. Got to clean that sucker out. And one other interesting thing is the design of the floor. They got these slots put in there, and it's supposed to make it drain out more smoothly and easily. And if you're constantly draining it from a hose or something like a lot of fishermen do, that should help keep all the juices and the fish stink out of there if that's what you're trying to accomplish. The leader of the middle of the pack is this Frosted Frog 54-quart Hyper Light injection molded cooler. It's quite a mouthful. They wanted to get a lot of keywords in there. In this chart, the Frosted Frog is represented by the thick aqua/teal line. This cooler is definitely in the middle of the pack here. It doesn't give the coldest colds, but it did keep just shy of the warmest warms. And it looks like it hung in there through the 6th night before all the ice was gone, based on how it performed relative to the others that I know still had ice. So while it may not have the most stellar ice retention, it does just fine. And it feels good, and it's made in the USA, and they have a decent warranty from a small business, so that's all to be appreciated. Plus they put some handy and useful little features on here that are also appreciated for that $200 price point. For example, you've got the padlock holes, you've got some cup holders, you have a little ruler here for anglers. The handles aren't half bad at all. I like that nylon webbing and that nice sturdy handle. While this has the male sticky outy drain plug, at least the cap is tethered. They've got some fun color schemes at Frosted Frog, but one thing I don't like about it is these latches. They're just a little bit harder to do than all the others. Look, oh, there, I got it with one hand. The way that knob works, it just takes a lot more effort to latch it closed. Yeah, see what I mean? But a nice lip to open it. Black inside is an interesting touch. They do have other options, but there's your tie down slots. There's a bottle opener. There's a second one. And then they got this little unique feature, which is actually a light. You can't tell, but there's a little LED light that shines out of that little hole, which should illuminate your whole cooler at night. Kind of a fun little gimmick. One other thing I noticed about the drain is that it drains really slowly, but I think that's intentional. So for people who like to drain the ice water out of their cooler, this is probably a good way to do it without letting a lot of air in, because it doesn't just gush out of there like other coolers. So that's kind of a good thing if you're the guy that likes that. I'm not sure if that's intentional or if it's just because it's a small hole, but it drains slowly. This is the Pelican Elite 50 quart, and it might surprise you that it's not one of the best. As you can see, the red line here represents this Pelican, and it had the highest high temperatures by a considerable margin, by as much as 7 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the next warmest cooler on one of the hottest days. And it never got quite as cold as the others at night. Now I know we were looking at air temperature near the top of the cooler, and that may not be the best indicator of how well a cooler keeps your food cold, which is going to be sitting down in the ice. But it is an indicator, and I've learned from testing more than 65 coolers now multiple times that gives me a good idea of which one's going to hold ice the longest and keep food the longest and burn through ice the least, compared to other coolers. So that's why I'm going off of that. Plus, it's a consistent way to compare one cooler to another. Besides that, this cooler is solid as a rock. I mean, it's injection molded, but this plastic feels thick and sturdy and durable. And Pelican backs that up with their lifetime warranty. So if you're a fan of that, plus the fact that it's made in the USA, this still could be a great option for you. However, it's not the cheapest. At $300, it's the second most cooler in this test after the YETI. And I can tell you that's after they dropped this price compared to when I bought this thing about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. But YETI also dropped their prices amazingly, so competition must be stiff right now. One other thing I personally don't love about it is that it is heavier and bulkier than the rest. These handles on the side are nice to grab onto and move around, but they take up extra space in the back of my truck or my SUV. And even for storage in the garage, it just takes more space. This lid comes out considerably compared to the body of the cooler. I'm kind of the opposite. Okay, that said, a lot of people like a lot of things about this cooler. It's got one padlock hole, which is nice that you don't need two. A nice solid bottle opener right under that. People love these latches, however, I pinched my fingers in them a couple times, but they're really functional and easy to use. 4 cup holders that are very functional for a can of soda or a can of beer on top. Plus you've got both inches and centimeters. That angle lets you see how it juts out to the side a lot, which makes it tricky to pack in some places. But it must have some pretty thick insulation there because it looks a lot smaller inside than it does on the outside. And I suspect there's either not as much insulation in the cooler, or look, maybe this gasket I've got is just leaving a little bit of an air gap. I don't know if that's enough to make the difference between a great cooler and a good cooler, but that's what I'm seeing. Next we have this little Coho injection molded 24 quart cooler from Costco. I did a full video review on this one if you want to check that out later. As you can see in light blue, this Coho cooler was pretty impressive given it's less than half the size of the others, and it had about half as much ice. It got real cold, and it never got real warm until the ice was totally gone. You can see it outlasted the RTIC Wild cooler by an hour or so just based on that little hump you see in the chart on the downhill of day 5. The price on this bad boy is only $60. It's on sale at the time of filming for $50, and when the most I've seen it for on Costco's website was $70, but that is a heck of a deal for a cooler of this type and size. It's a small cooler, so it's not meant for extended trips, but the fact that we saw it go 5 days here is pretty impressive, and that wasn't even packed totally full of ice. Granted, it was pretty mild weather in the spring here. But still, you compare that to the same size of a YETI Roadie and you're going to pay $250. You can't beat the bang for your buck on this cooler. It is small but mighty, and it is very portable, easy to carry around, put anywhere and take anywhere. Besides that, it has a few extras that the big dogs carry, like a bottle opener, nice cam latches, and even a drain plug, which is rare on a little cooler like this. Go watch the full video if you want more details on this guy. That brings us to our final contestant, which is the RTIC 52 quart Ultralight wheeled cooler. Now, if you're kind of surprised that this came in last, consider that these are all great coolers, so I'm not saying it's a bad cooler. In fact, I did a full review on this one too. You can go watch that video if you'd like, and you'll see this thing is a tank. But when you look at the chart here, you'll see the line for this RTIC wheeled cooler in green. I really like this cooler, but not for its ice retention, which is pretty average among most coolers. It was the first one to bow out this time, but when it was cold, it stayed pretty cold, even in the heat of the day. Just never the coldest. One thing I really love about this cooler though is the wheels. They're these never flat wheels. They're actually kind of soft and they're pretty smooth even over difficult terrain, which you'll see in that video where I pulled it behind a side-by-side. And then I also love the handle. This toe handle has a nice kind of ergonomic silicone covered grip. It's just smooth, it rolls smooth, pushes and pulls just fine. It's got some of the same basic features as the non-wheeled Ultralight, like the padlock holes and these nice easy to use latches, the lip there to lift it, these little indentations for tie-down straps as well. But in the lid here, it's got this silicone net, which makes it nice to just stuff some things back behind there. That could be veggies or Go-Gurts for the kids or whatever. It looks about the same as the non-wheeled version, but for some reason, they put less insulation in there somewhere. It even says that on their website. But you do get a bottle opener, and you get nice handles that you can pick it up with to put it in the truck as well. Of course, it has that drain plug I'm not a big fan of, and this tether came loose. And while you can't have it all in one cooler, I guess, for $250, it's still a pretty good value in my opinion. And that price came down $50 from last year when I bought it. And the fact that I tortured this thing and it's still rolling well is a testament to its durability. So go check out that other video if you want to see more. So are these ultralight injection molded coolers really a lot lighter than a normal cooler? So what we see here is that the lighter ones are 21 or 22 pounds for a full-size cooler. Compare that to a rotomolded cooler of the same size, and based on my experience and a whole bunch of other coolers I have and tested, they typically come in around 30 pounds or maybe 35 to 40 pounds with wheels. So they are indeed lighter, but they are not near as lightweight as a very inexpensive blow molded cooler. You can get a similarly sized Coleman 316 series cooler for a whole lot less money and a whole lot less weight. The same size will only weigh about 12 to 15 pounds, as much as half the weight of these behind me. So it really comes down to what you want to pay, and how much these other features matter to you. But if we're being honest with ourselves, that ultralight or hyperlight word they're using is really just a marketing term. But I digress. Let's wrap this thing up now, shall we? Here's what I recommend. First off, all of these coolers are good coolers in my opinion. They're gonna do the job, so if you have one you really like for whatever reason, just go and get it. If you don't need a cooler, don't go buy another cooler. We don't need more frivolous plastic roaming the earth. But personally, if I had no coolers, which is completely theoretical because I have plenty, I would go and get this Engel. I think it offers the most value for the money you're paying, especially when you compare it apples to apples prices with this RTIC. And I'm not just saying that because they gave it to me for free, gosh darn it. I do really like that cooler. And this size and class of cooler, the YETI Roadie 48, does indeed offer the best ice retention, and it has those nice wheels, which makes it very portable. However, you're paying twice as much for it. I love the RTICs too, and I wouldn't fault anybody for going with either one of them. But the two that I probably wouldn't pick are that Pelican and that Frosted Frog. Just based on my personal preference and the cost benefit you get out of those, they wouldn't be my first choice, or my second, or my third, but probably somewhere down there in the middle. But how about you? Which one's your top pick and why? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you like gear reviews like this. There's one more ultralight cooler I have that I did not include in this video. I ordered it from Temu. If you want to see why I didn't include it today, go watch this video next. Then gear up and get outside. Man, I can talk for a long time about coolers. This is getting ridiculous.